Hello my friends or new friends, and welcome to Not Famous. I want to break down this story. It's a heartbreaking one, but I don't spend 20 minutes giving you all the fluff. We go over it really quick. So let me tell you about the girl in the window who spent the first 7 years of her life without anybody knowing that she existed until a neighbor saw her in the window. Danielle Crockett was known as the girl in the window. She was 7 years old, but no one knew she even existed except for her mother, her mother's boyfriend, and her two adult brothers, who all lived in the same tiny little house. And her living conditions horrified authorities. When they had found her, they immediately contacted child abuse authorities and investigators. There was cockroaches all across the floors, and the girl was surrounded by old dirty diapers. It was horrific. And there's so many stories of child neglect in the media, and we studied the case of Genie Wiley, but out of all of them, this story is very, very disturbing because when found, her mother and family just simply didn't give any reason why they did this to her. They showed no signs of regret, no signs of responsibility, no signs of remorse in what they had done to her. They never gave any reason. And she spent these 7 years in this room, just filthy, in this, literally sitting on dirt. She had lived in some very horrific and stressful conditions for the first 7 years of her life. Nobody even knew about her existence, and after a neighbor saw a girl looking out from the broken window in July of 2005, she was finally discovered. But up to that point, nobody knew that she was, there was no papers on her. There was no, she didn't have a social security card or anything like that. The government had no idea that, she obviously hadn't gone to school or been taught anything, educated in any way. She was treated horribly. So according to the neighbors, they only knew that a woman and her boyfriend and two older sons were living in this tiny little house. So when they saw this small girl appear out of nowhere, it was kind of alarming to them. And so they called the police to investigate. And other neighbors from the areas had also called the authorities for child neglect. And this was actually the third call in which finally police investigators pulled up to the house and decided to come and take a look inside of it. Now, when the call went out to the police, child services were sent to the scene, and along with them, 2 Plant City police officers were sent to assist in Plant City, Florida. When the senior police officer arrived at the scene with his partner, he saw a car was parked outside of the house and a woman leaning heavy over her steering wheel, and she was crying uncontrollably and kind of losing her lunch. The officer tried to ask her what was wrong, and he found out that she was from the Florida Department of Child and Family Services, an investigator. She said it was unbelievable, the worst that she had ever seen in her entire career, about what she saw in the house. But it wasn't enough to prepare the officers for what they were going to witness when they went inside of it. Upon entering the house, the young officer rushed immediately back out to empty the contents of his stomach, because the strong putrid smell coming from the house was just horrific. When the senior officer went further inside, he saw hundreds and hundreds of cockroaches just roaming around on the floors and every single surface of the house. Lights, the curtains, the counters, everywhere. There was like this overpowering stench coming from the house, and it was that to be discovered of animal and human urine and feces. Absolutely disgusting. And these people, they seemed to act pretty normal. At that moment, he noticed the 2 older boys sitting on an old couch in the living room, and then a woman, the mother, had just wandered out there, and she was asking what all of this was about. And she was very normal about her living conditions, as if nothing was wrong, as if this house wasn't filthy and just covered with bugs and feces. It's disgusting, my friends, but people live the way that they adapt to live, I guess. So the officer pushes past her, he goes further into the house, and he turns the door handle on a small, dark, closed room. And in there he sees a small girl lying in the dark. She doesn't have lights on, she just pretty much lives in the dark. And she's sitting on this old, ridiculously worn out mattress that's just filthy with dirt and feces and urine from over the years, never washed or anything like that. A huge pile of dirty diapers lying on the side of it. The girl was covered with insect bites, rashes, and sores just all over her body. And the officer tried to pick her up, and she yelped and kind of tried to evade him, and almost came off like a dog in some regards. She was to some extent feral. It's very heartbreaking. But he put this girl over his shoulder. He tried to leave with her, and then the mother intercepts the officer, tries to stop him, and he had to stop himself from trying to arrest the woman upon the orders to let child facilities do their investigation of the case. And the officer made it a priority to remove the girl from the house. He takes her to a hospital to get looked at. She was in these horrific conditions. And the mother ends up kind of blaming things on financial constraints. And it's a relatable case for many, many families, although I don't think it comes anywhere near justifying what they had put this girl through. Danielle's mother, when asked by the investigator on the scene about how she was bringing up her children, was reportedly found to say that she was doing it the best that she could. The officer, Mark Holst, he was appalled at her response, quite frankly, and at seeing the hundreds of cockroaches with the family, and apparently they're trying to live happily. And he told her straight up that her best sucked for her children, but she kept on insisting, "I'm doing the best that I can." And she said she didn't know what was wrong. Like, she claimed like she didn't understand what was going wrong. And, she had a dirty house, of course, but she didn't know that a dirty house was against the law. However, she's raising these kids in this condition that has had permanent impacts on their psychological state and physical states, of course, and less so for the two grown boys, but so much for Dani. I told police that she got into financial trouble while living in Las Vegas after losing her job, and her husband had passed away in 1997, essentially leaving her to raise their two sons, Bernard and Grant. And she later had a one-night stand, which resulted in her becoming pregnant. Crockett decided to relocate her three children at that point in time to Plant City, Florida, to stay with a relative after losing her mobile home and possessions. It's an interesting story, but horrific what happened to her. Danielle left the house and spent, the first time in her life, after spending the first 7 years of her life inside of this small house, never going outside, never leaving that dark room, that filthy dark room. She finally got to see other people. She went to a hospital to stay at Tampa General, and she saw many experts, doctors, psychologists for weeks and weeks and weeks, trying to make sure that she was well enough to survive, at least physically. But they could tell that there was, a significant amount of neglect on her mind, and it was very severe, and that she was going to need a lot of help. She would eventually get through some of that therapy and start to make some strides. To this day, she still doesn't really speak, but she has begun to communicate, and she now has been adopted by a nicer family who actually takes care of her and has really tried to help her in every way, and she's trying to live somewhat of a normal life. And we can go deep into what's happened to her since. That's a whole nother video, but she was freed at the age of 7 and had a chance to live a normal life, although she's permanently scarred by this and will be for the rest of her life. The only other thing to note is that Dani's mother avoided any jail time at all for what had happened. Michelle Crockett was never imprisoned for child abuse or endangerment. Crockett agreed to permanently relinquish her parental rights over Dani after Florida judges deemed her an unfit parent, to say the least. Initially, the court sentenced her to some community service, 2 years of house arrest, probation, and all of that ended by 2012. Because of Crockett's plea agreement, local authorities didn't really have enough to go through a lengthy set of legal proceedings, and so they placed Dani in a care facility. Dani was able to receive immediate treatment as a result, and the family that adopted her was able to do so. But there was never really any real punishment for what happened and the horrific treatment. Imagine a parent having a child and never telling anybody about it, and raising that child in a dark and dirty room like that for so many years. It's horrific, my friends. Anyways, my friends, if you want to see more stories like this one, make sure to hit the like button. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you get more notifications. I do these videos at least once a week. Some of them are heartbreaking. Some of them are just crazy stories of how people became famous or infamous for something that they did or for something that happened to them. This is Not Famous. Thank you to the patrons of this channel for their support. Always appreciated. I will talk to you guys again very, very soon. I hope you have a great day. And as always, my friends, adios amigos.